Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chapter 4. In Chapter 4, we're going to look at decision making as an organization and the way in which individual level decision making impacts the organization. So, first, there are several kinds of decisions. First is the executive level decision, which focuses on reduction of the overall crime rate. Mid-level decisions get more specific, and it focuses on reductions in violent crime, drug crime, property crimes, and juvenile offending. Decision making at all levels is going to be driven by organizational policy, organizational goals, and different managerial styles. All three of the following are utilized regularly. So first are command decisions, which are decisions that are made alone with little to no input from anyone else in the organization. Consultative decisions gathers input from other people, and decision is only made after taking into consideration all of that input. And consensus decisions are a joint decision made by a group or a committee. Something that's really important to decision making is something called emotional intelligence. This is a fancy way of saying read the room, as my husband always says. This is the ability to recognize in others what their emotions are, what their reactions are, what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with. In addition to recognizing your own emotions, taking in all those factors and making a decision based off of the feedback that you're reading from the room. This is one of the most important skills that anybody can have in any field. If you have, some people are just naturally born with this, naturally good at it. Others not so much. Others it takes a big learning curve. But it certainly allows you to recognize problems before they become exacerbated, and it allows you to manage those problems before they get out of control. Another contributing factor to decision making in law enforcement is intuition. What is intuition? Some might call this a sixth sense, some might call this a gut feeling. But essentially, it's insight based on your subconscious. So you just know something. There's no process, you just know. And this incorporates both facts and emotions. This seems like a really kind of it seems sort of to lack tangibility. But if you want a scientific explanation, the theory behind intuition or that gut feeling, or those, sort of animal instincts that we all have, is that your brain has actually acquired information in the environment and processed it before you can cognitively recognize it, which is where that feeling comes from, that fight, that flight, that I think you're going to do something dangerous or violent, right? You can't say, this is why I think it. And the idea being that this is a survival mechanism, that our brains are like, look, I don't have time to explain this to you, but you are in danger or something bad is about to happen. And that's where that intuition comes from, which frequently drives law enforcement decision makings. There are also snap decisions, which are immediate and decisive. These don't always turn out well, but decisive is always better than indecisive. Indecision is a big problem for any sort of organization, any sort of law enforcement organization. Delegation is another form of decision making, and that's where you say, "Hey, I'm gonna task somebody else with making this decision." Delegation can be really hard for some people, especially your Type A perfectionists who really live by that rule that if you want something done right, you better do it yourself. But as a manager, as a supervisor, as an administrator, you can't do everything yourself. You have to rely on your subordinates and you have to rely on the organization. So delegating and determining what you can delegate, what you should delegate is an important decision as well. There's something called creative procrastination. I call this kicking the can. I am the antithesis of a procrastinator. I don't procrastinate because I feel the weight and the stress of the decision. I'd rather just figure it out and move on than get anxiety because it's not getting done and I don't know what to do. But kicking the can happens a lot, right? And this is where no decision is made and I don't really know what I want to do here. So let's just see how this plays out. Maybe it'll support itself out, maybe not. Either way, we'll decide later. This is a bad habit for organizational administrators, right? Decisiveness is better than indecision. There's also technology-driven making, and this is making decision with the aid of technological input, whether it's laptops and cruisers, right? So you pull somebody over, you run the license plate, you find out they have a record. That's going to impact what you decide to do next in that circumstance. Or whether it's, software that runs data, overall sort of macro level data to make evidence-based decisions about policies and procedures. So technology can guide decision making. There's always also participatory decision making, and this is when everybody in the organization is given a say, right? Everybody provides input, and each person comes to the table with a different set of skills, a different set of experiences, a different set of insights, and therefore they all have contributions that they can make, which is where participatory decision making comes into play. Something that threatens decision making is what we call groupthink. And groupthink is people don't want to rock the boat, right? The bulk of people are saying, I think we should do A. And really, you're the one sitting there thinking A is not going to work, B is better. But I don't want to be the lone dissenter. I don't want to be the one to speak up and cause a problem. Groupthink is dangerous because maybe you, the lone dissenter, are the correct one. Or maybe your option is something nobody's ever considered or thought of before. And if you don't speak up because you're afraid to break from the majority, then decisions are not made in their optimal capacity. I want to talk about problem-oriented policing. We also call this POP for short. Problem-oriented policing utilizes the SARA model, and SARA is an acronym, SARA. Each letter stands for something. But it is a model of problem solving for decision making, and SARA stands for scanning, analysis, response, and assessment. So scanning is identifying those reoccurring problems and prioritizing their importance. So looking at all your crime in your area and saying, what is the most important here? What do we need to deal with first? What can't wait? Analysis examines the problem's causes, scope, and effects. So how big of a problem is this? How often does this problem happen? What's the outcome of the problem? So that's analysis. Response is trying to minimize the problem by providing alternative solutions to the circumstance. Implement an alternative. See if it fixes the problem, or maybe it doesn't fix it, but it lessens it. Or maybe it doesn't do either of those things. Maybe it aggravates it and makes it worse, right? So we want to provide a response, which leads us to the final letter of SARA, which is assessment. And that's where you want to evaluate your alternative. Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? Did it make it a little less worse? Is it worth the cost benefit of the resources put in and the minimization that came out of it? Was the problem solved? So SARA is a common method of decision making, especially for those creative procrastinators who have a hard time coming to a decision on their own. Using a decision making process is a successful option. I also want you to know what something called crime prevention through environmental design is. This is abbreviated by its letters, CPTED. It's pronounced CPTED. And CPTED always asks the question, what is the problem and why does it exist in this specific location? In fact, CPTED is a geographically driven method of identifying a problem and identifying solutions. So why is crime always happening here in this environment? And what is it about this environment that we can manipulate or can change or can alter to make this area less crime prone? We also have predictive policing, and we've talked about that a little bit. This is data-driven intelligence using crime data from a multitude of locations in order to get an overall picture of crime, so we can look back at a year of crime in these areas and say, okay, so this is what happened in the last year. What do we think is going to happen next year? And based off of what happened in the past, can we predict crime trends in the future? And can we deploy our resources, our manpower accordingly in a more organized capacity rather than just taking a shot in the dark? So why do we work to refine better decision making? Well, there's a myriad of reasons, right? Certainly, we don't want to just be willy-nilly, right? There's a lot of taxpayer dollars at stake here. There's, budgetary concerns. We want to spend money as fiscally responsibly as we can. And we want to utilize the manpower and the resources in an organization to our fullest extent. So that's a big part of it. But a bigger part of it is civilly related and liability related. So the first is the Civil Rights Act. It's a legal decision that anybody acting under the authority of the state, which is going to be law enforcement, correctional officers, etc., who violates an individual's civil rights, and that's going to fall under the Bill of Rights. Okay, amendments 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 14 are the most commonly violated civil rights. But anybody acting as a state agent who violates another person's rights that fall under those amendments can be sued. Right, and the state agency can be sued. So we want to minimize those costs. We want to minimize the civil liabilities that we pay out. We want to minimize the egg on our faces of our organizations because we want to operate within the confines of the law. And better decision making will minimize those violations. Another important concern is something called vicarious liability. And that is people who are associated with the officer in question who violated someone's civil rights can also be sued. So vicarious means, that you're sort of living through somebody else, right? You're not the one in the driver's seat, but you are involved directly as a result. So what this really means with vicarious liability is if you're a supervisor and one of your line personnel violates someone's civil rights, you have vicarious liability. You can be sued too, even though it wasn't you who directly violated those rights. Okay, so we want to limit lawsuits as much as we can. And the fewer civil lawsuits, the more funding the agency has to work with for, whether it's paying for overtime or paying for equipment to keep officers safe or paying for whatever's needed. It also extends legitimacy in the community. Nobody feels good about a crime agency, a criminal organization, whether it's law enforcement or corrections, that has been sued 32 times in the past year and has lost 27 out of those 32 lawsuits. Right, the community is not going to feel good about that. They're not going to trust an agency like that. They're not going to want to interact with an agency like that, and be cooperative. So we want to avoid negative press. We want to avoid eroding citizen trust, and we certainly don't want to pay out lawsuits and funding if we don't have to, and if we can avoid doing so through better decision making.